Wow, what a beautiful introduction. I hope everybody can see that I am a British Sign Language user. You've got Sam's voice that you can hear, so sometimes Sam will continue to voice me. It's just that she's working between two languages, and sometimes those languages take a little bit more time to express. So you'll have to bear with me, as you can see a lovely example now. Okay, my name is Doctor. I'm still getting used to that. Emma Ferguson-Coleman. I am deaf. I use sign language as my first preferred communication. I am a lesbian. I am a vegan. And I'm not an ideal academic. So thank you for that attribution before. I don't fit into every box. I would like to tell you a story about my upbringing and my experiences as a deaf person, and the life and the journey that's taken me to where I am today. I have been a PhD. I achieved my PhD in 2016, so I'm still a baby. I'm still not owning that PhD jacket yet, and I'm still continuing my journey. I'm hoping from the end of this you will be inspired and believe that you can do it as much as I did. I want to talk about representation and how we are represented. So you're not hearing me, you're hearing Sam's voice. So it's actually Sam representing me. As I'm telling you these stories and sharing my life experiences with you, it's actually Sam that's representing me. But it's important that me and Sam work together. We develop a bond, we work together and establish a good way of working so you can realise who I am. You can identify me as Emma and see my personality come through. And my world view is represented through me as a person and my lived experience, and that will be represented in this presentation through Sam. So I was born deaf. Prematurely. I'm deaf because I was born prematurely, and I had to receive medication to keep my life going, and that medication caused me to become deaf. My parents were fully informed that I was going to be deaf. My grandmother at the time was like, "Oh, you're deaf. What are we going to do? What are we going to do with you? What job are you going to do being deaf?" I know. Emma can become a pathologist. Do you know why? Because she doesn't need to communicate with dead people, surely. You know, who needs to communicate with them? And I was like, no, I don't do dead people, thank you very much. I like to talk to the living. So, I want to talk about labelling and assumptions that we make every day. We do make the assumptions when we see people, and that's through my positioning as a deaf person, I am constantly marginalised. I'm cheating. I've always been treated as less equal. I'll share with you an example. I like to tell people I am a doctor, wherever possible. It's my right. I put my blood, sweat and tears into that PhD. So when I do my online shopping, for example, my wife is hearing. So on my online shopping, it gets delivered, gets put into the house. The driver, male driver says, he directed to my wife, "Are you still practicing, love?" And my wife's like, she was in a gardening outfit, and she looked at herself and went, "Me? Oh, you want the doctor? Well, this is the doctor, not me. This is my wife, she's the doctor." And he was like, "Oh, really? Oh, bless you. Oh, you're deaf." And I kicked him out the house, as you can imagine, as quick as can be, because that's the attitude that I live with on a daily basis. People in my community are facing these barriers continuously, and we're having to challenge these. These are sometimes double, quadruple. It's just with different language users. So, because of those barriers, I am here. And I was involved in some media work with the BBC. I was on Channel 4, and it was I was an online presenter, and I wanted to share and fight and communicate, show sign language as it is, and spread the word that access is important, and information, and it's the activist in me that wanted to break through barriers and share my language and get the point across. I'm not disabled. I am a minority language user, and that's so important to me. It's who I am. If you go back to 1998 and 1999, there was a march protesting and asking the government, please recognise our language. So I stood up on a square, Nelson's column, and I stood up as proud as can be, asking for this recognition. And we got the recognition for BSL in 2003. So that, my work and the activist in me and my personality, the strong woman that I am, wanted to get that recognition for my community. But I also want that recognition for me as a deaf professional and academic. So my media work impacted my family dynamics considerably because they were like, wow, Emma uses 2 languages. I'm like, yes, I was brought up, I was asked to speak and try and listen and try and fit in with your world, your hearing world, and I was fighting against that. But I wanted to learn sign language. At the age of 17, I realised that actually what I've been told to do is and fit into this world, I'm not going to fit into it. I want to use sign language. You guys have to fit into what I want and what my needs are. And then I recognised what bilingual is, and I became bilingual. I was able to converse in English, lip read, but also I found my sign language voice, and that was so important to me. So I then worked in mental health advocacy, and I wanted to try and break down some of these inequalities. Again, people experience mental health issues in all aspects of life, and it's very, very common, but deaf people experience double the barrier. So I'm constantly arguing with mental health professionals and practitioners at that point, saying, look, we need to make sure that deaf people are giving access, and I was constantly challenging. I was known as a bit of a Rottweiler in my day. I was constantly barking and telling people, please, this is what needs to happen. So I needed to build the evidence, and I realised, what's the point in me constantly growling and barking at people? How can I back this up? How can I get people to actually listen to what I'm trying to say? There isn't any guidance out there for deaf people, so I'm barking, but nobody's responding. So I put my muzzle on, and then I became an academic. It's probably the best thing I could have done, really, but yeah. So this is my research journey. I'm not doing so much of the barking anymore, but in 2010, not long ago, so I'm fairly new to it, I stepped into the world of academia. I applied for a job at the University of Manchester, which I was very excited about, and I was a research assistant. So what do? So a month later, my supervisor met with me and said, what do you think about doing a PhD? I'm like, yeah, of course. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it entailed, but I was up for it because I thought, why not? And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. However, the academic world is a fantastic place to be. As you can see up there, I'm part of a research group, which is SWORD, Social Research with Deaf People. And actually, we're based in G. McFarlane. Very, very welcoming bunch where we work in sign language. We research for the deaf community, and we do cradle to grave and everything in between. So please do come and visit. Our work is very rich, very resourceful, and it goes back into the deaf community, and that's our main aim. So some of my work you can see up in here. So I initially worked in a project for deaf people with dementia, showing their stories. It was the first time that ever a deaf person with dementia was given the opportunity to share their story and share their experiences. Research, as you know, is a journey. And it's never a one-way street. It is a path that takes you left to right, up and down, as it's been said today, and you have funding, and then there's funding available and then isn't, and you're juggling constantly, and then one thing runs out, and then you're having to go down a different road. And that took me working with deaf parents whose child or children were autistic, and then I went back into dementia, and that is my baby. That's where my passion is. That's what fills me with that drive and that passion. So I did that, and that's a couple of steps. And then I'm going to do my postdoc and become a research fellow, and that's my next step. I'm currently doing some life story work with deaf people with dementia and their carers and families, because we've got a rich history. Lem said before about Manchester and the old institute. You mentioned the Deaf Institute. Well, there's Manchester Deaf Centre, but Manchester has a rich deaf community. It's not just been established, it's been around for many, many years, and we're very privileged to be where we are in Manchester and have that rich community among us. So social inclusion. We all talk about inclusion. Inequalities, we talk about diversity, and we embrace that. But when it comes to the deaf community, we're not necessarily recognising that. How do deaf people fit into this? We can't exclude deaf people. That can't continue to happen. You know, sometimes we do it without even realising it's a mistake. Sometimes we're just uninformed. We just don't know. And that's fine. There's that assumption that actually deaf people are all right. They can do, can they? You know, can deaf people drive? I still get asked that question. Can I drive? You know, how do you order your coffee in the morning, Emma? Really? You know, I'm fine actually. I can do them things quite easily. But it's still, though, that attitude. I attended a conference with an interpreter recently, and I got to register. I got to the registration desk and I said, "Hi, I'm here to present Dr. Emma Ferguson-Coleman." Straight away, the receptionist looked at the interpreter and goes, "Oh, can you tell her that the room is in..." And I felt this big. I felt really disempowered. I felt invisible. The interpreter was a priority and not me. And that's such a shame that I'm still experiencing that on a daily basis. My PhD thesis, I hadn't had my Viva at the time. I submitted my thesis and I went to hearing colleagues and I was saying that I've just handed in my PhD, etc. It's really exciting. I've got my Viva coming. And the question that came from my colleague was, "Who wrote your thesis, the interpreter?" And I'm like, "Hang on a minute, love. Let me just tell you. This is what you look like when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and have to write a PhD. You know, it doesn't come easy." And they were under the assumption that the interpreter has to read and write and do everything else for me, and it's not the case, you know. So just wanted to share that experience with you. The community, again, when we think about inclusion issues, sometimes there is that lack of awareness, particularly around dementia. So when you've got the lack of awareness about the community itself, double that when we're referring to the dementia community. So I met 2 people recently. I've got Harold, who's 77, has just had been diagnosed and had dementia for his journey started 5 years ago. He attends the Deaf Club, and he has done historically and enjoys playing dominoes. But he said to me during an interview that actually I can't go to the Deaf Club anymore because I'm too slow. And they get fed up of me. And they agreed with that. And they said, "Harold, you're better off staying at home." These were his own community members. So deaf people with dementia and not understanding some of the changes. The deaf community needed educating as well. But actually, rather than slowing down for Harold, so these injustices that are happening from outside, but also within the community itself. There's another story, which was Pearl. Pearl took a break from caring for her spouse for over a number of years. And she wanted to go to the local deaf community and have a cup of tea and chat with her friends for an hour, and then was going to come back home. So off she went. So Pearl sat down with a lovely cup of tea, and then her friend said, "Oh, what are you doing here? You're an awful wife. You need to be at home looking after your husband, Harold, and you're not allowed out the house." You know, I'm not allowed respite. My only community members are telling me that I'm not allowed to do that, and it's just the lack of awareness, and it's that inequality and the lack of access that deaf people have to health care. So again, my PhD journey has been very exciting, but often quite scary at times. Just to give you a brief summary, I was asked to talk about my successes and some of the milestones that, obviously, these smaller milestones within, these goals that we have to achieve before we get to the end, and do we ever get to the end? So we've got our ethics approval, so that's the first milestone. Some of you may know that, some of you don't, and at the university ethics committee are very nice. And for me it was hard because I was working with people with dementia, and we had to consider capacity. And that went back and forth to ethics. We need to agree a consent that met the needs of the community but also covered the university, because they're seen as a vulnerable group of people. So that was a success. I had to obtain the approval, and that was one of those milestones. For me, my PhD work was reflecting and representing a minority group. And their stories and narratives were given the opportunity for the first time to be made visible. They were put out there in the world and given a voice and a perspective. They were able to share that. And that, to me, was what I wanted to achieve. And that was one of my biggest achievements. The Viva, obviously, you will get there one day. You will meet your Viva. And I will share with you some tips. I found it enjoyable. It was a great experience. I was awarded an A1, and I was overwhelmed. Thank you. Again, when I tell people I got an A1, they're still a bit like, really? Deaf people can do it. It's not taught. I didn't want to tell you that, but I was forced to tell you because I tend not to really blow my own trumpet, but I think it's important to share with you that there's only 30 deaf academics who use sign language as a first preferred language in Europe, so not just in the UK. So I'm one of a very few. I'm in a minority group, but it's important to show you that deaf people can achieve. The struggles. It was time management. So it was actually working as a research assistant and doing a PhD. So I had project responsibilities, but also responsibilities for my PhD. So juggling that was difficult. It's interesting when you go home to families and friends and say, I'm doing a PhD, and they're like, oh, so you basically just sit down all day and read? And actually, they don't appreciate how much time it takes to go to a conference and network and make those phone calls and send those cold emails. It is difficult, but it is achievable. And I think you just need to take time to recognize that struggle as part of your journey, and it builds the character that you are at the end. For me, life happens. Through my PhD, I lost both of my parents on the journey to the end of my PhD, which was very difficult because you're going through a grieving process at the same time as trying to look at where you're going in the future and trying to carry on and achieve something massive. And this may happen through your journey. It could be a smooth one, and I pray it is, but at the end of the day, regardless of what that looks like, communication and your supervisors and the support is really important along the way. The benefits of a PhD, it opens up doors, it gives you opportunities. Sometimes you may open the door, or maybe somebody else will open the door for you, regardless of what that looks like. The University of Manchester gives you those opportunities, and it's important to take and get what you can. My final tips, and you'll probably laugh, enjoy it. That's all I can say. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Take it, own it. It's amazing. Do it. You can do it, and that's so important that we take that. But don't run. Don't run too fast. Take it. Shave your legs. Get your costume on. Don't run too much. Feet could even be better rather than shaving. but just keep going. Take those steps. Do it at a pace that suits you and your needs. Always remember that you're not on your own. There's other people that have been through, are going through, and can empathize and share and understand. Please don't feel like you're ever on your own. There's people around you here to support and scaffold you. Use your times well with your supervisors, and they may throw curveballs at you and you think, why are you doing this? It's painful, it hurts, stop. But they want you to do the best. They want you to achieve. They're asking you to be more of a critical thinker. They're asking you to stretch and believe and challenge your own thinking. Obviously, you're here to be stretched. That's why you're doing a PhD, because at the end of it, you're going to come out a different and more informed person that's going to feed into a wider community. Enjoy your Viva, because you're sitting with 2 or 3 other people that have actually read your thesis. I doubt it's ever going to happen again in your lives. You've spent so much time, blood, sweat and tears. In that, it's the only opportunity you're ever going to get, really getting your teeth into having a good conversation about it. So enjoy that. Take that moment. And because I want to raise the profile of the deaf community, obviously that's always going to be my output. But I want you to just think about how you, going forward in your research, can incorporate deaf people. We have a voice, we have experience, we have so much to share. We can do it, but we just want the opportunities. And there's actually a web link that really supported my journey, and I've put it here. The Thesis Whisperer. Please have a look. It gave me lots of information. It gave me access to other PhD students and shared experience. And I felt a lot of times when I felt alone, this website got me through. So I would always recommend you check that out. So every year, I love to see, whether it's winter graduation or summer graduation, looking out the window and seeing people taking pictures with family and friends. It'll be lovely to see you there. So thank you for having me. I hope you enjoyed that.